Greetings, all. I go by the name Daughter of Ophir. Thank you for coming to my channel. It is actually 5:18 a.m. Probably it's 5:22 a.m. And I was doing some studying of the word of the book of JASHER, which is also mentioned in the book of Judges in the Old Testament. And I put a video out probably about the end of January of this year, about the early month of February this year, about it's called a prophetic warning. And there was a part 1 and a part 2 to that prophetic warning. Where instead of doing a part 3 and a part 4, I decided to just do a whole nother lesson on that. And that prophetic warning was about the daughters of Zion going out to the land of Cush, to the Cushites, which we know as Gambia today. And this is what this lesson today is about. And the book I'll be reading from today is the book of JASHER, which is one of the many books mentioned in the Old Testament, which is for the edification of the children of Israel. And like I said, I was doing some studying of the word of this book because I'm always looking for more spiritual food, more spiritual bread, and more wisdom from the Most High. I seek it, and He put this upon my spirit this morning, and He said, let it be known. So I'm here to let it be known. Again, thank you for coming to my channel, Daughter of Ophir. Please subscribe and like if you like the lesson. If you don't, that's fine. I'm not looking for the glory of men. I'm looking for the glory of the Most High. So, let's get into this lesson. So, I call this lesson The Seed of Noah, the Generation of the Sons. And this is the book of JASHER, chapter 7. The book of JASHER, chapter 7. And these are the names of the sons of Noah: Japheth, Ham, and Shem, which we know this of the Old Testament and of the flood of Noah. And children were born to them after the flood, for they had taken wives before the flood. These are the sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus, 7 sons. And the sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Tagarmah. And the sons of Magog were Elikanaph and Lubal. And the children of Madai were Achan, Zelo, Shazonai, and Lot. And the sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarhish, Shittim, and Dudanim. And the sons of Tubal were Arafi, Kesed, and Tari. And the sons of Meshech were Dedan, Zaran, and Shabashni. And the sons of Tyrus were Benid, Gera, Loperion, Gilak. These are the sons of Japheth, according to their families, and their numbers in those days were about 460 men. And these are the sons of Ham: Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan, 4 sons. And the sons of Cush were Sabai, Havilah, Sabtai, Radma, and Satesha, And the sons of Ramah were Sheba, Shabai, and Dedan. And the sons of Mizraim were Lud, Anam, and Pethros, Shasloth, and Shaptor. And the sons of Phut were Gabal, Hadan, Benah, and Adan. That's Hadan, Benah, and Adan. And the sons of Canaan were Zidon, Heth, Amorai, Girgashi, Hivi, Arki, Sinai, Aradi, Zemadi, and Kamathi. These are the sons of Ham according to their families, and their numbers in those days were about 730 men. And these are the sons of Shem: Elam, Asher, Apashad, Lud, Aram, 5 sons. And the sons of Elam were Shashuan, Makul, and Harmon. And the sons of Ashar were Morus and Mokil. And the sons of Arpashad were Shalach, Anar, and Ashkol. And the sons of Lud were Pethor and Bizayan, and Bizayan. And the sons of Aram were Uz, Shol, Gather, and Mash. These are the sons of Shem, according to their families, and their numbers in those days were about 300 men. And Shem is the generation that I'm from, that the children of Israel are from. These are the generations of Shem. Shem begot Arpachshad, and Arpachshad begot Shelech, and Shelech begot Eber, and to Eber were born 2 children. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days the sons of men were divided, and in the latter days the earth was divided. And the name of the second was Yotan, meaning that in this day the lives of the sons of men were diminished and lessened. These are the sons of Yoktan, Amadad, Shelaf, Shazarmuveth, Yarak, Haduram, Azel, Diklah, Abel, Abimo, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these, Jobab, all these are the sons of Yoktan. And Peleg his brother begot Yin, and Yin begot Serug, and Serug begot Nahor, and Nahor begot Terah, and Terah was 38 years old, and he begot Haran and Nahor. And Cush, the son of Ham, the son of Noah, took a wife in those days in his old age, and she bare a son, and they called his name, Nimrod. Now I want to stop here just to explain a little bit. A great part of this lesson is about the Cushites and who they were. My video that I put out about a month or so ago about the warning of the daughters of Zion going over there to Zambia, especially without husbands, how they were targets and how they was killing them back to back to back to back. As I get deeper into the reading and into the story, I will explain to you. You will find out why we were literally targets. Those daughters of Zion that went out there were murdered were literally targets. They killed them as if they never existed. And we're going to get into that. So, Cush being a big part, the Gambians, the descendants of the Cushites of in the days of ancient, what part they play today, and why those daughters of Zion were murdered in the manner that they were murdered in, that they were killed in. So, stick with me. And they named him Nimrod, saying, At that time the sons of men again began to rebel and transgress against God. And the child grew up, and his father loved him exceedingly, for he was the son of his old age. Now this is the son of Cush, Nimrod. And in these days when Nimrod was brought forth, when Nimrod was brought forth, the earth had begun to become wicked again. Now these are the days after the flood of Noah. For he was the son of his old age. And the garments of skin which God made for Adam and his wife when they went out of the garden were given to Cush. For after the death of Adam and his wife, the garments were given to Enoch. We know of Enoch, the son of Jared. And when Enoch was taken up to God, we know that God took up Enoch. He gave these to Methuselah. Enoch gave the garments of Adam and Eve to his son Methuselah. Chapter 7, verse 26, the book of Jasher. And at the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the until he went out of the ark. And at the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark, and they were with him until he went out of the ark. And then they're going out. Ham, the son of Noah, stole these garments, the garments that God had gave to Adam and Eve, that Enoch was holding on to and gave to his son Methuselah. And then they're going out. Ham stole those garments from Noah, his father, and he took them and hid them from his brothers. And when Ham begat his firstborn, Cush, he gave him the garments in secret. And they were with Cush many days. And Cush also concealed them from his sons and brothers. And when Cush had begotten Nimrod, he gave him those garments through his love for him. And Nimrod grew up, and when he was 20 years old, he put on those garments. And Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments, and God gave him might and strength, and he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yea, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals, and he built altars, and he offered upon them the animals before the Lord. And Nimrod strengthened himself, and he rose up from among his brethren, and he fought the battles of his brethren against all their enemies round and about. And the Lord delivered all the enemies of his brethren in his hands, and God prospered him from time to time in his battles, and he reigned upon the earth. Therefore, it became current in those days when a man ushered forth those that he had trained up for battle, he would say to them, like God did to Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter in the earth, and who succeeded in the battles that prevailed against his brethren, that he delivered them from the hands of their enemies. So may God strengthen us and deliver us this day. And when Nimrod was 40 years old, At that time, there was a war between his brethren and the children of Japhet, so that they were in the power of their enemies. And Nimrod went forth at that time, and he assembled all the sons of Cush and their families, about 460 men. And he hired also from some of his friends and acquaintances about 80 men, and he gave them their hire, and he went with them to battle. And when he was on the road, Nimrod strengthened the hearts of the people that went with him. And he said to them, "Do not fear, neither be alarmed, for all our enemies will be delivered into our hands, and you may do with them as you please." And all the men that went were about 500, and they fought against their enemies, and they destroyed them and subdued them. And Nimrod placed standing officers over them in their respective places. And he took some of their children as security, and they were all servants to Nimrod and to his brethren. And Nimrod and all the people that were with him turned homeward. And when Nimrod had joyfully returned from battle, after having conquered his enemies, all his brethren, together with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them, and they placed the regal crown upon his head. And he set over his subjects and people princes and judges and rulers, as is the custom amongst kings. And he placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his host. And he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. Now Terah, who was elevated above all the princes that Nimrod made him, was actually the father of Abraham. So these are the days before Abraham also. So there was the flood of the giants, and then there was, after the flood, Noah, and then as his sons grew up and their sons grew up and their sons grew up, then the Lord brought forth Abraham. So, and he placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his host, and he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. And whilst he was reigning according to his heart's desire, after having conquered all his enemies around, he advised with his counselors to build a city for his palace, and they did so. And they found a large valley opposite to the east, and they built him a large and extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of the city that he built Shinar, for the Lord had vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. And Nimrod dwelt in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies, and he subdued them, and he prospered in all his battles, and his kingdom became very great. Now, there was a point in time when Nimrod was humble, the Most High showing him favor because he was a mighty hunter. He hunted well in the earth, and he was mighty in battle. And he more so showed him favor because he was a great grandson of Noah, which was the only righteous man in the land when the Lord brought forth the flood to cleanse the land the first time. And he gave Noah the wood to build the ark and told Noah how to load the ark up and close Noah up in the ark and brought forth the floods. Noah was the only righteous man in the land, so he's showing favor from generation to generation. And he's seen how mighty Nimrod was. And so also Nimrod also wore the garments of Adam and Eve. So that really made the Lord look upon him and watch his life. So, chapter 7, 44. And Nimrod dwelt in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies, and he subdued them, and he prospered in all his battles, and his kingdom became very great. And all nations and tongues heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to him, and they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings, and he became their Lord. Hence, he became their Lord and their king. And that's where things started to take a turn. Because when people start to bow to a man as if he's God, the spirit of ego starts to speak. The spirit of arrogance starts to speak. The spirit of pride starts to speak. And it becomes a thorn in a man's side. And they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings. And he became their Lord and king. And they all dwelt with him in the city at Shinar. And Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah. And they were all under his power and counsel. And all the earth was one tongue. So there was one language spoken over all the earth. The words of union. There was a union. There was one family. But Nimrod did not go in the way of the Lord. And he was more wicked than all the men that were before him from the days of the flood until those days. And he made gods of wood and stone, and he bowed down to them. And he rebelled against the Lord, and taught all his subjects and the people of the earth his wicked ways. And Mardan, his son, was more wicked than his father. So he made gods of wood and stone, and he bowed to them and gave them sacrifices. Now we know from the Old Testament that the Lord detests the things made by the hands of man. Things that don't talk, things that cannot deliver you, things made of stone, wood, and metal. He detests these things. And this is why. He's seen man make things with his own hands, and then man draw a face on these things or paint a face on these things and treat these things like they're alive, like they have done something for them. And it's just the same thing it was before it was shaped into whatever it was shaped into. Just a tree stump or just a piece of rock chiseled into a face or something. It's still the same thing. So me personally, I feel like in those days, men was really psyching themselves up. I've always wanted to say that. But that's how I felt about those things. Okay, and they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings. And they became their Lord. He became their Lord and King, which that's where the problem came in at with the Lord. They forgot about God. So once men started to bow to Nimrod as if he was God, his ego told him that he was better than God. And these are spirits. These are spirits. Now let's go back a little bit. Now, before the flood, there were the Nephilims, the giants, of when the angels came down off of Mount Hermon and mated with the beautiful women of the earth, which actually were the daughters of Canaan. And Cain, who slew Abel, his children, and they were down at the base of the mountain. And Enoch and those that were righteous in the land in the earlier days, not the earlier days, but during the times of Enoch, they praised the Lord so much. There were many men that followed the Most High because of Enoch. And I mean thousands of them that followed Enoch. And they're on Mount Hermon. And they praised the Lord so much that the Lord started to call them the sons of God. And then at the base were the daughters of Canaan and the children of Canaan, which the Lord told the sons of God that were on Mount Hermon not to mess with because they were dirty and they were not They were not right. They were not right in the head. And not to mess with them, but they were coaxed into going down there anyway. Um, that story actually is in the book of Adam and Eve, uh, book 2, I believe. And I got to get into that. I'll be back with a lesson with that also. So let's pick up where we left off at. So we know when the Lord brought forth the flood that it killed everything in the land. Now the flood didn't actually kill the giants. The Lord brought confusion upon the Nephilims, and they started to fight each other like big dumb beasts, and they ended up killing each other. Now, when they died, there were evil spirits inside of the Nephilims because the sons of the Most High had mated with earthly women. And it was a big confusion. There was great transgression within the earth behind that. And so because of that, when those giants died, evil spirits spewed from out of their pores, pretty much, came up out of them into the world. And these spirits, anyone who exalts themselves against the Holy Spirit or exalt themselves against God even just a little bit, these are these spirits. And so, in all the earth, chapter 7:46, in all the earth was one tongue, so they spoke one language, and the words of union, they were all together. They spoke words of togetherness. But Nimrod did not go in the way of the Lord, and he was more wicked than all the men that were before him. So he was more wicked than all the men that before him. In other words, when they bowed to him, being the king was one thing, but when they bowed to him and started calling him Lord, that's when he compared himself to God. There's only one spirit that will try to exalt himself as God, and that's Lucifer. Follow me. And he made gods of wood and stone, and he bowed down to them, and he rebelled against the Lord, and taught all his subjects and the people of the earth his wicked ways. And Mardon, his son, was more wicked than his father. And everyone that heard the acts of Mardon, the son of Nimrod, would say, concerning him, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. Therefore it became a proverb in the whole earth, saying, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. And it was current in the words of men from that time to this. In other words, as we say sometimes, the apple don't fall too far from the tree. So, 49, chapter 7:49, JASHER. And Terah, the son of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's host, was in those days very great in the sight of the king and his subjects. And the king and princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. So they praised him up. And Terah took a wife, and her name was Amthalo, the daughter of Cornabo. And the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. Terah was 70 years old when he begot him, and Terah called the name of his son that was born to him Abram, because the king had raised him in those days and dignified him above all his princes that were with him. The book of Jasher, chapter 8. And it was in the night that Abram was born. All the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. And when all the wise men and conjurers went out from the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes toward heaven that night to look at the stars, and they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens and he swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurers were astonished at the sight, and the sages understood his matter, and they knew its importance. Now, speaking of these conjurers and these sages, we know that Nimrod had went far from the Most High, from the Lord, having conjurers and sages in his kingdom. He had went dark. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurers were astonished at the sight, and the sages understood this matter, and they knew its import. And they said to each other, the only betokens the child. This only betokens the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever. And he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands. And the wise men and conjurers went home that night, and in the morning all these wise men and conjurers rose up early and assembled in an appointed house. And they spoke and said to each other, behold, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known to him. And should this thing get known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, why have you concealed this matter from me? And when we shall all suffer death, therefore, now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw, and the interpretation thereof, and we shall then remain clear. And they did so, and they all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground, and they said, may the king live, may the king live. We heard that a son was born to Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of thy host, and we yesternight came to his house, and we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night. And when thy servants, this is why you can't trust men, still to this day. They'll sit with you and eat. They'll smile in your face and be joyous with you, and go run and tell your good news to someone else. This is why the Lord says, do not trust men. And when thy servants went out from the house of Terah to go to our respective homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east. And the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up your great stars, and swallowed up 4 great stars, from the 4 sides of the heavens. And thy servants were astonished at the sight which we saw, and we were greatly terrified, and we made our judgment upon the sight, and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that this thing applies to the child that is born to Terah, who will grow up and multiply greatly and become powerful and kill all the kings of the earth and inherit all their lands, he and his seed forever, which we know of this coming to pass, reading about Abraham in the book of Genesis. And now our Lord, Abraham was mighty in battle. And now our Lord and King, behold, we have truly acquainted thee with what we have seen concerning this child. If it seemeth good to the king to give his father value for this child, we will slay him before he shall grow up and increase in the land, and his evil increase against us, that we and our children perish through his evil. And the king heard their words, and they seemed good in his sight. And he sent and called for Terah, and Terah came before the king. And the king said to Terah, I have been told that a son was yesternight born to thee, and after this manner was observed in the heavens at his birth. And now therefore give me the child, that we may slay him before his evil springs up against us, and I will give thee for his value thy house full of silver and gold. And Terah answered the king and said to him, My lord and king, I have heard thy words, and thy servant shall do all this that this king desireth. But my lord and king, I will tell thee what happened to me yesternight, that I may see what advice the king will give his servant, and when I will answer the king upon what he has just spoken. And the king said, Speak. And Terah said to the king, Aon, son of Morad, came to me yesternight, saying, Give unto me the great and beautiful horse that the king gave thee, and I will give thee silver and gold, and straw and provender for its value. And I said to him, Wait till I see the king concerning thy words, and behold, whatever the king said, that will I do. And now, my lord and king, behold, I have made this thing known to thee, and the advice which my king will give unto his servant, that will I follow. And the king heard the words of Terah, and his anger was kindled, and he considered him in the light of a fool. And the king answered Terah, and he said to him, Art thou so silly, ignorant, or deficient in understanding to do this thing, to give thy beautiful horse for silver and gold, for even for straw and provender? You see what Terah did to him, what the king was requesting, what Nimrod was requesting of him. Instead of it being the baby, Terah made it the horse, this beautiful horse that Nimrod had gifted him. And Terah compared his son, which is worth more than gold, to him. So to be offered money for the slaying of his son, this is the wit. This is the wit that the men in these days had. And yes, so. And the king answered Terah, and he said to him, Art thou so silly, ignorant, or deficient in understanding to do this thing, to give thy beautiful horse for silver and gold, or even for straw and provender? Art thou so short of silver and gold that thou shalt do this thing, because thou canst not obtain straw and provender to feed thy horse? And what is silver and gold to thee, or straw and provender, that thou shouldest give away that fine horse which I gave thee, like which there is none to be had on the whole earth? And this is how Terah felt about his son Abram. And this is how the king speak highly of a horse. And the king left off speaking, and Terah answered the king, saying, Like unto this has the king spoken to his servant. In other words, you just said the same thing to me about my son. This is how I feel about my son. And that's how you feel about your horse? The horse that you gifted me? This is how I feel about my son. I beseech thee, my lord and king, what is this which thou didst say unto me, saying, Give thy son, that we may slay him, and I will give thee silver and gold for his value? What shall I do with silver and gold after the death of my son? Who shall inherit me? Surely then at my death the silver and gold will return to my king who gave it. And when the king heard the words of Terah, and the parable which he brought concerning the king, it grieved him greatly, and he was vexed at this thing, and his anger burned within him. And Terah saw that the anger of the king was kindled against him, And he answered the king, saying, All that I have is in the king's power. Whatever the king desired to do to his servant, that let him do. Yea, even my son, he is in the king's power. Without value, in exchange, he and his 2 brothers that are older than he. And the king said to Terah, No, but I will purchase thy younger son for a price. He's still insulting his intelligence. He's insulting Terah's integrity as a man. And the king said to Terah, No, but I will purchase thy younger son for a price. And Terah answered the king, saying, I beseech thee, my lord and king, to let thy servant speak a word before thee, and let the king hear the word of his servant. And Terah said, Let my king give me 3 days until 3 days till time, 3 days time till I consider this matter within myself, and consult with my family concerning the words of my king, and be pressed the king. And he pressed the king greatly to agree to this. And the king hearkened to Terah, and he did so, and he gave him 3 days time. And Terah went out from the king's presence, and he came home to his family, and spoke to them all the words of the king. And the people were greatly afraid. And it was in the 3rd day that the king sent to Terah, saying, Send me thy son for a price, as I spoke to thee. And shouldest thou not do this, I will send and slay all thou hast in thy house, so that thou shalt not even have a dog remaining. And I'm going to stop there at 42 minutes and 5, 6, 7 and counting. And I'm going to do a part 2 to this lesson. Shalom.